Atlanta, Georgia. 1880s, a city reborn from ashes, a nation finding its footing after seismic shifts. It was a landscape ripe with opportunity, and in this fertile ground, a pharmacist named Asa Candler harbored an ambition that burned brighter than any chemical retort. He wasn't just seeking a remedy for common ailments, he was hunting for a fortune. And he found it, not in a cure, but in a peculiar syrup, a potent, dark concoction whispered to hold a secret, the nascent magic of Coca-Cola. It was a humble beginning, a simple syrup with the promise of something far grander, a vision that began to take root in the mind of one determined man. Candler was far more than a mere chemist with a knack for elixirs. He possessed a rarer, sharper instinct, the profound art of persuasion, the subtle science of making people want what they didn't yet know they needed. He saw beyond the sweet, syrupy liquid in its simple bottles, envisioning a future where this singular beverage would quench the thirst not just of Atlanta, but of an entire, sprawling nation. His marketing was nothing short of audacious, a relentless, omnipresent flood of free coupons, beautifully illustrated calendars, and distinctive pocket clocks, each bearing the nascent brand's unforgettable name and distinctive script. He understood that creating desire was as crucial as creating the product itself, laying the groundwork for a branding revolution. He acquired the rights to this promising syrup for a sum that, in hindsight, was astonishingly low, a mere handful of $1,000 changing hands in 1888. While others saw merely a peculiar local novelty, a fleeting trend, Candler perceived a global phenomenon waiting to be uncorked and unleashed upon the world. He was a ruthless buyer, an insatiable acquirer, consolidating control with a singular ferocity that left his rivals disoriented and scrambling to keep pace. The Coca-Cola Company, now under his absolute, sole dominion, began its inexorable, meteoric ascent, a testament to his unwavering belief and aggressive acquisition strategy. The world, it turned out, was profoundly ready for Coca-Cola. Its distinctive, effervescent taste, its refreshing character, quickly became an indelible symbol of American optimism, a nationwide tonic for the modern age. Candler, the brilliant architect of this burgeoning empire, was now undeniably a titan of industry, his name resonating with unparalleled success. He had, it seemed, bottled pure lightning, and the entire world was lining up, eager to drink from the source, establishing a cultural icon recognized by billions. But as the colossal empire stretched its tendrils across continents, a subtle but significant distance began to grow between the king and his vast kingdom. Candler, who had once been intimately involved in every granular detail, began to delegate, to withdraw from the daily fray. The relentless grind of managing an ever-expanding global enterprise started to feel like an immense burden, a persistent distraction from his other burgeoning interests, particularly his increasingly lucrative and consuming real estate ventures, which demanded his attention with growing urgency and promise. The sacred, secret formula, once guarded with a fierce, almost fanatical proprietary zeal, began to be shared more widely, its hard-won exclusivity subtly but surely diluted. Critical decisions that once bore the imprint of his immediate, razor-sharp judgment were now increasingly made by others, by committees, by ambitious men with entirely different priorities and perspectives. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift began to ripple through the company's very DNA, altering its fundamental character and compromising the singular vision that had defined its early, explosive growth and unparalleled success. He was accumulating more wealth than any single human being could possibly spend in multiple lifetimes, yet the relentless hunger for more, for different, more abstract ventures, seemed to perpetually gnaw at him. His once laser-like focus began to fracture, splintering into a dozen different directions. Coca-Cola, the extraordinary child of his relentless, singular dedication, started to feel less like the beating heart of his empire and more like just another asset, a single piece in a much larger, more complex financial puzzle. This diversification, while potentially sound in theory, diluted his personal investment in the brand's core. The world outside the executive suites was irrevocably changing, and the subtle, emerging signs of evolving consumer tastes, the whispers of new competition, were perhaps not even perceived by a man increasingly removed from the gritty front lines of the market. The vibrant, pulsating rhythm of the marketplace, the very energetic beat that had propelled his astonishing rise, became a distant echo, muffled by the thick layers of accumulated success and a growing disinterest. The pulse of progress was fading, and the company's connection to the zeitgeist began to weaken, imperceptibly at first, then with gathering momentum. His own children, the designated inheritors of his monumental name and vast fortune, also inherited his growing detachment from the business that had created it all. Their vision, or perhaps more accurately, their lack of a cohesive vision, for the company began to subtly but surely shape its future trajectory. The reins of power, once held so tightly and so purposefully by Asa himself, began to slacken in their hands, allowing precious opportunities to slip away, like water spilled through loosely cupped fingers. This familial succession, devoid of the founder's original fire, proved a critical vulnerability. By 1919, the landscape of American business had transformed. New titans were emerging, wielding new strategies, and the iconic Coca-Cola, while still immensely profitable, was no longer the undisputed, unchallenged colossus it had once been. It was at this juncture that Candler, perhaps sensing the shifting tides or simply succumbing to the allure of immense liquidity, made a decision that would forever alter the trajectory of his legacy. He agreed to sell the company, the very embodiment of his life's work and unparalleled ambition, for a staggering sum, $25 million. The buyers were an investment consortium, led by the astute banker Ernest Woodruff, who recognized the enduring value and immense untapped potential within the brand. For Candler, it was an astronomical payday, a staggering sum that would cement his status as one of the wealthiest men in America. But for Coca-Cola, it marked the end of an era, the closing of a chapter written by the singular genius of Asa Candler, and the beginning of a new, uncertain phase under different stewardship and a significantly altered corporate philosophy. The sale, however, was not as clean or as absolute as it might have first appeared. A contentious legal battle soon erupted, a bitter dispute over the exact terms and conditions of the sale, specifically concerning the lucrative syrup business and other related assets that Candler had retained. This protracted fight would drag on for years, a shadow cast over the glittering deal, draining resources and sowing discord where there should have been only celebration of a monumental transaction. The ensuing legal wrangling was costly, both financially and emotionally. Candler, a man who had once commanded immense respect and wielded absolute authority, found himself embroiled in protracted litigation, his reputation and his vast fortune now subject to the whims of the legal system. The very empire he had so meticulously built and so spectacularly sold was now the battleground for a fierce struggle over its residual value, a painful irony for the man who had once been its unchallenged sovereign. During this tumultuous period, Candler's health began to decline. The stress of the legal battles, coupled with his advanced age, took a significant toll. His grip on his remaining affairs, already loosened by his earlier disengagement, began to slip further. Decisions were made, or perhaps more accurately, not made, that allowed his personal fortune, still immense but no longer growing, to stagnate and, in some areas, to subtly erode. The shrewdness that had defined his early career, the almost predatory instinct for value and opportunity, seemed to have waned. He was no longer the man who had seen the future in a simple syrup, who had built a global empire from scratch. Now, he was a wealthy elder statesman, seemingly content to rest on his laurels, perhaps oblivious to the subtle currents of financial markets that continued to flow and shift, carrying away opportunities he might once have seized with unhesitating alacrity. The legal battles finally concluded, but not without considerable cost. The judgments rendered, the legal fees incurred, and the sheer emotional drain of the protracted dispute significantly diminished the vast fortune Candler had amassed. While still undeniably wealthy, the astronomical figures once bandied about his net worth were now considerably less so. The king had sold his kingdom, but the subsequent squabbles over the spoils left his personal coffers considerably lighter than they might have been. His final years were spent in relative quiet, a stark contrast to the thunderous roar of his empire-building days. He had achieved a level of success few could even dream of, yet the latter part of his life was marked by a gradual, almost imperceptible fading of his financial empire, not through catastrophic collapse, but through a slow, steady attrition. The vibrant energy that had fueled his ascent seemed to have been replaced by a quiet resignation, a disengagement from the very forces that had once propelled him to such dizzying heights of prosperity. Asa Candler died in 1929, leaving behind a legacy that was, in many ways, a paradox. He was the architect of one of the world's most enduring brands, a man who had profoundly shaped modern marketing and consumer culture. Yet, his personal fortune, while still substantial, had not reached the stratospheric heights it might have had he maintained his focus and his grip on the reins of his creation. The immense wealth generated by Coca-Cola was, in the end, partially eroded by his own decisions, or perhaps more accurately, his lack of them. The story of Asa Candler is a potent reminder that building an empire is only half the battle. Maintaining it, adapting to changing times, and resisting the seductive pull of detachment are equally, if not more, critical. His empire, built on brilliant marketing and an almost obsessive attention to detail, began to fragment not with a bang, but with a slow, quiet withdrawal of his personal engagement, a subtle dilution of his singular vision that allowed opportunities to be missed and value to slowly dissipate. He had mastered the art of acquisition, of consolidating power, of creating a brand that would become synonymous with refreshment and global commerce. But perhaps he failed to master the art of letting go, or more precisely, the art of continuing to engage even when the initial thrill of creation had passed. The psychological burden of immense wealth, the temptation to diversify into areas that promise different kinds of rewards, can be a powerful force, capable of distracting even the sharpest minds from the foundations of their success. The psychological trap of success can be profound. When you've reached the pinnacle, when the world seems to bend to your will, it can become increasingly difficult to perceive the subtle shifts, the emerging threats, or the new opportunities that lie just beyond the horizon of your current comfort zone. Candler, insulated by his vast fortune and increasingly occupied by other interests, may have lost the crucial sensitivity to the market's pulse, the very thing that had fueled his initial, phenomenal rise to unparalleled prominence. The history of wealth is not merely a chronicle of acquisitions and profits. It is also a deeply human story, woven with threads of ambition, ego, foresight, and, crucially, the character one possesses when tested by the immense pressures of fortune and power. Candler's journey illustrates how even the most brilliant strategic mind can falter when the personal drive begins to wane, when the relentless pursuit of amorth overshadows the stewardship of what has already been so magnificently built. His story is a powerful case study in the psychology of sustained success. It highlights the fine line between shrewd delegation and critical disengagement, between wise investment diversification and a dangerous dilution of focus. The Coca-Cola he sold was still a titan, but the spark, the singular, driving force that had made it an icon, was undeniably diminished by his gradual departure. The empire, though vast, had lost its most vital component, the unyielding, personal commitment of its creator. The legal battles over the sale were a significant factor, a tangible drain on his wealth and a psychological burden. They represented a moment where the immense success he had achieved became entangled in a messy, protracted conflict, a testament to the complexities that can arise even from seemingly straightforward transactions when vast sums are involved. These disputes underscored the reality that fortunes built so rapidly and on such a grand scale can also be subject to unforeseen complications and costly entanglements. Ultimately, Asa Candler's story is a profound lesson in the ephemeral nature of even the greatest fortunes if not managed with continuous vigilance and adaptability. He built an indelible brand, a global phenomenon, and then, through a combination of disinterest and legal entanglements, saw a portion of its immense value slip through his fingers. It's a stark reminder that the forces that build wealth are not always the same forces that sustain it, and that the human element, the character and focus of the individual, remains paramount. He amassed a fortune that reshaped global commerce and left an indelible mark on the modern world, only to see significant portions of it dwindle through legal disputes and a gradual detachment from his own creation. Would you have held on, or sold? The court filings and biographies detailing this period run to thousands of pages. If you spent this video wondering what you'd have done, give it a like and subscribe. The pursuit of wealth is a constant test of character.